Were your school years the best of your life or the worst of your life? For me, they definitely fit the latter. My favourite memory of school was leaving. I remember my friends and I symbolically burning our books in a barbecue in a backyard in Australia just because it was like a symbolic thing of we have now left. This is our past and we can move forward. School was incredibly stressful for me and I was bullied a lot and I just found it to be a place that I didn't really fit in. I hadn't found my tribe, so to speak, at that point. It was a lonely time and it was a very difficult, challenging time. Why do I make this point? Well, in the past month or two, we have been experiencing extreme school avoidance from my daughter. Now, she's in a special educational needs school and she's doing great there. Funnily enough, just a couple of days ago, we had a parent-teacher evening. They were singing her praises about how well she's doing academically and how she's fitting in with the school and how she's enjoying it when she's there. But at the moment, our experience is mornings are very, very, very difficult and we don't quite know what to do about it. We're getting a lot of reasons that she doesn't want to go to school. She's making up a lot of things and doing a lot of things to avoid having to get into school. Anything to avoid having to get into the taxi and get to school, to the point that I've had a couple of times to actually physically drive her that distance in myself because it was the only way I could get her into school. School avoidance is a common aspect, especially of pathological demand avoidance, PDA. It is something that comes up quite often. And I've explained it here before, but it's so worth revisiting, is that school is just demand on demand on demand. The mornings themselves are just littered with demands. You've got to get up, you've got to get your clothes on, you've got to clean your teeth, you've got to wash your face, you've got to get your breakfast, you've got to make your lunch, you've got to get out of the door, you've got to get into the taxi, you've got to get to school or your car or whatever, get into school, get out, get into your first lesson and whatever else. And then school itself is just demand ridden, no matter how understanding the school. And my daughter's school is very, very understanding of her needs. But it's just something that goes on and on and on with demands because they have to have an element of control. They can't have people just running riot. And it creates a real challenge for us as a family. I remember how much I hated school, and I can really understand. My daughter struggles with, a big trait of PDA is the ability to make friends, but maintaining those friendships is incredibly difficult. If you've got someone in your life who is just sort of wants to always be in charge and in control, that's, generally considered a bad thing. And it's something that my daughter would do naturally because that's part of PDA, that need for control. What it means is that people will, be very friendly to start with, but very quickly move on. And it's an incredibly lonely time, and I can really relate to that. So I'm finding myself in this inner turmoil. My daughter needs to go to school. She needs that. And for me, and people may argue this, but for me, school is 25% the actual education and 75% learning how to live with and work with other people in society. Now, I talk a lot about the fact that we need in this society to make more adaptations and have more understanding for people's needs. But I don't think that takes away from the other side of things where there has to be a sort of meeting in the middle to some degree. I don't want to put my daughter under a pressure of having to not be herself and her authentic self, but I find myself struggling to know that she's got to somehow work in this world regardless of how it is. And I want her to be the best she can be in that. School is one of those things, legally it's a requirement, and if my daughter doesn't attend school, then we can get letters and all kinds of bad things. We can get fined for her not being in school. It's incredibly important that she is attending for her education, for herself, and like I say, when she's there, she loves it. When she gets in, she's really positive, she enjoys it. Yesterday morning we had an absolute meltdown in the morning because she didn't want to go to school, because she was avoiding going to school. Once I'd got her in, I had to drive her in yesterday, and once I got her in, we'd sat down with her tutor and gone through everything that had happened. She went into school and had her day, and when she came home yesterday evening, she was over the moon. She was like, yeah, it was a great day, I really enjoyed it, and she was genuinely happy. It's one of those things, I know once she's there, she will enjoy it, she will thrive in that environment. There's something about that morning routine at the moment that is really, really triggering her anxiety. What that leads to, though, is a question that I do struggle with quite a lot. And it's something I know a lot of parents and carers of PDA kids struggle with themselves. In fact, of autistic kids in general, neurodivergent kids. To be honest, any kid, I am neurotypical, but I was avoidant of school. I didn't want to go because I hated it. I hated the people. I hated the environment. But I was in a situation I had to go. We all get that, don't we? We've all been to school. We know what it's like. I think everybody goes through a level of school avoidance. I don't know any kid that enjoys actually, going to school. Some do, but my experience is, most kids don't enjoy it for whatever reason. What I find though is that you get that balance. So at some point, there is the PDA side to my daughter, the part that she can't help, whatever's going on in her head, the subconscious reactions that she has, I need to recognize. But I also need to recognize as a parent the other side that is sometimes, and it sounds like a horrible word to use, but I think it's really important. There's a manipulative side to things. And we've seen this coming out. Some of the actions my daughter has taken over the last few weeks to avoid going to school have been very deliberate and very thought through and calculated. And that presents a challenge. We can see the world in a very black and white way most of the time. And a lot of people do. There's the right thing, the wrong thing. You can say there's the PDA side of stuff. You can say there's the more kid type of stuff. You've got demand avoidance. You've got school avoidance. These things exist in a black and white way in our heads. But I'm finding more and more there's this huge grey area in between those two extremes. At some point, she's making these decisions calculated. But then the reason she's making these decisions in a calculated way is that it triggers back to that anxiety that's there and something that she's not enjoying or coping with. We've gone through a lot of stuff that could be causing this and a lot of things that are potentially going to help. Anything we can do to support her. And we're making that point really clear. But it's made things incredibly stressful around our house with just the level of challenging behaviours that we're experiencing and the techniques and methods she's using to avoid having to get into school. It's one that I struggle with because I don't want to lay those demands on her. I understand pathological demand avoidance to the point that low demand environments are better. But to me, school's a necessity. Now, there are people I know, I've spoken to many people who take a different line for their kid. And I think that's a really important point. This is something that's individual. If you've got children who are really struggling with school for whatever reason, and they're avoiding it because it's becoming a mental health issue for them, I think that's very different. That's not what we're experiencing here as far as I can see yet, but I obviously need to keep my ears and eyes open to those potentials. But the reality is there's a point of this, which is that she just doesn't want to go to school and she's doing what she can to avoid it. Because once she's there, she's thriving. Now, that could be masking. We've talked a lot about masking on this channel, and I'm very aware of masking. But masking would typically be that when she gets home to a safe place, then you'd see that explosion, the Coke bottle effect that we've talked about. We're not experiencing that. Evidenced by yesterday, she came home, she was in a great mood because once she was there, she'd had a great day. And generally, that's what we find. Some days she's had a bad day and we hear about it, but we're not getting those classic masking characteristics of bottling it up, pretending to be happy, then getting home and boom. So somewhere in there, it's about that morning. And I'm really sort of thinking out loud here in many ways and trying to sort this out in my own head. But I find it really, really difficult because, like I say, I don't want to push her in a way that's going to be damaging for her mental health long term. But by the same token, I don't want to limit her because she's not being encouraged and supported to do the things that are, necessary. And there are some things that are necessary. And I'm really struggling with it in my head as to what to do about it. Anxiety is obviously a key factor here, and tapping into that anxiety. We've spoken a few times. She texts me a lot. We've talked about that, her way of communicating with me. She texts. We find that when she's able to just write it down, it helps her sort it out in her head. But it means that she's not confronted. She's not trying to figure out facial expressions and all the things that she struggles with. She can just type out her thoughts and feelings and then she can send it across to me. And then I can read it and I can get some understanding. And we know we've identified some of those things. And I think that's the key thing that I'm taking away at the moment is that need for communication within our relationship as father and daughter. The more I can understand what's going on, the more I can support her. But that can be a challenge in itself. There are certain things that she doesn't want to open up about. I can't force her, and I wouldn't want to. I wouldn't want her to feel that she has to do anything like that. That's another demand that I'd be placing upon her. But it's sort of trying to unpick these little things of what's causing the anxiety. And a lot of them are PDA traits. It's things like she has a particular school student that she doesn't get on with. And something that PDAs do at some level is they'll find the person they don't like and it becomes all focused on them. It's almost like a negative hyper focus, if you like. All becomes about them, and everything this kid does just completely drives my daughter up a wall. She can't deal with it. She doesn't like it, and it's enhanced in her head. And that other classic PDA trait of always sort of seeing the fault of others but not in herself, that's something that really comes out. So she's exacerbating the situation in many ways, and then he's exacerbating it. You've got these two very similar people creating this issue, and I know that's playing into things. It's something I don't have the answers to at this point, but I wanted to say it because it's something that I think a lot of people go through, and it's not something you go through alone. There is a fantastic group on Facebook called Not Fine in School, amazing support group that was set up, the idea being that it's for these kids who aren't fine in school. I don't think my daughter is in that particular frame at the moment. It's not that she's not fine in school, it's that almost she's not fine in herself, and that's what I've got to tackle at this point. School's really important. Her education is really important. I want her to be as successful and brilliant as I know she is throughout her life. School's an important part of that. I'd love to hear your experiences. If you've had something similar go on, if you've been struggling with these same issues, I'd love to hear about it. Can you please pop it in the comments? It would make a huge difference. Likewise, any tactics that you've come across, any solutions or ways to support your kids through school avoidance, it would be fantastic to hear from you. I will see you again on the next episode. In the meantime, please do stay safe.